let me go back to Memo Hosho's statement, and I quote, "Excluding women from economic activity is a waste of productive resources. And one way to include women is to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor." Now, to wake up in 2017 in South Africa and see how the gap between the haves and the have-nots continues to expand, it's a very sad time. It's an indictment about what are we doing as entrepreneurs to help narrow that gap. And it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to do our part. And technology, I believe, is one of the things that could be used to close that particular divide. And then she concluded that whereas it was not long ago that we were concerned about the digital divide, we now need to look at technology as a means to build bridges between those at the top and those at the bottom. Now, there are three key messages we can extrapolate from the above, and those being: number one, the inclusion of African women into the mainstream economy is no longer optional, ladies and gentlemen. Two, there's a real need to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. There's a real need. Three, technology is one of the keys we can use to close this particular divide. Now, here's a fact. I like to walk and talk, but maybe I shouldn't do that this evening because I'm all wired up. Here's a fact. Who has to walk miles to go and draw water from a well? It's a woman. Who has to walk for kilometers to go and fetch wood? Who has to walk kilometers? Thank you. To go and fetch wood, to keep the home's fires burning, literally. Who has to look after an ailing relative on the side of the bed? Who has to understand that a man of the house has to travel to the metropolis, peri-urban areas, the cities, to go and fend for the family? And we know of stats of men who never came back home. And who has to look after the household, put food on the table, clothes on the back of the children, a roof over their heads? The reality is, the face of poverty in the continent is female. Yeah. The face of poverty in this continent is female. Hence, for me, the economic emancipation of women is not only critical, but it is the survival, the absolute survival of our continent. When women are economically liberated, we make better choices for ourselves, we make better choices for our children, we make better choices for our bodies, we make better choices for our society, we make better choices for our communities, we make better choices for our countries, we make better choices for this continent. When we're economically emancipated and liberated, we make better choices that serve the world. And a similar pattern has been shown in sub-Saharan Africa, especially regarding the influence of growth on reducing poverty. Now, the report concurred with the sentiment. This is the UNESCO report in 2016. It concurred with the sentiments that Mele Namuhosho found that reducing inequality is not only helpful, but thank you, Kira. So Memo Hosho found that reducing inequality is not only helpful, but essential, because high inequality is divisive and socially corrosive. Now, the economy of Sub-Saharan Africa, beg your pardon, has grown at an exceptional pace over the past decade, with 7 of the 10 countries with the highest growth rates worldwide to be found here in Africa. However, growth has been concentrated in particular sectors of the economy and in specific geographical areas within countries. And the benefits of this growth, ladies and gentlemen, has not been broadly shared. And have left out a large section of the population. Now, poverty has not fallen as much or as fast as expected, and economic inequalities have remained high, and unfortunately, again I say, the face of poverty in the continent is female. There's a real tragedy, ladies and gentlemen, unfolding before our eyes, where the rest of the world continues to move forward, striving for inclusive growth, while African economies remain inaccessible to women. Now, this was confirmed by the World Bank in an article published in 2009, which says something quite disheartening, okay? That in Africa, indeed, I say again, the face of poverty is female. You see, our continent has one of the highest rates of female labor participation, second only to Asia. But vulnerable employment, such as unpaid family work, remains the norm. African women work longer hours than men and perform most of the unpaid household work as well. And research shows that women's average daily hours in agricultural work, for example, in 4 sub-Saharan African countries is almost 467 minutes a day, compared with 371 minutes a day for men. And yet, the disparity continues. Now, to bring this closer to home, I want to talk about the annual census performed by the Businesswomen's Association of South Africa. I had the greatest privilege to serve as the president for 3 years, 2007 to 2009. And every year we do the census to basically try and track the upward mobility of women, both in government, women in business, women in corporate spaces. And every time, every year I get the census, my heart still sinks. The pace of women being emancipated, it's still at such a snail pace. Let me tell you what our stats sit at this year. The census paints a bleak picture. I'm even stuttering because I get so emotional about these things. About the narrative of the South African woman we make up 51% of the population. In fact, we know that, right? And of the workforce. But we only hold 11% of the available positions as CEO and chairpersons of boards. And what's even more concerning is the fact that women continue to get paid less doing the same work as men. And the South African gender pay gap is estimated, on average, to be between 15% to 17%, which is basically implying that a South African woman would need to work 2 months more than a man to earn the equivalent salary that he would earn in a year. Now, if the gap persists, a South African woman would never catch up with her male counterpart or her male colleague. Ultimately, she loses out on pension and other benefits that are coupled to a basic salary. I believe as entrepreneurs, we need to get serious about this issue, and we need to do it very quickly. Starting with addressing the gender gaps in education. We also need to create interventions which seek to reverse